Hey guys, how is everyone tonight? Oh, what a Thursday. It's been a long day and I want to tell you all about what I did today, but I'm going to wait for everyone to join. So if you are just joining in, of course, tell me who you are, where you're calling from, whether you've been watching these so far, or whether you are brand new to this series, which is called Fall Semester Wine School. We are now halfway through. We've done this is the 6th episode tonight. So I guess at the end of this episode, we will be halfway through. And we're going to have 6 more sessions going through to the end of December, skipping Thanksgiving Day. It's been really, really fun so far. John said to me, John's been watching every week, I think, or most weeks. Except for the decanting week. But John said that one of his favorite quotes of mine is, I love talking about how much I love talking about wine. And isn't that the truth? I get to hop on every Thursday with you guys at 6 and not only drink amazing Texas wine, but also just talk about wine. And I feel like it's, when you have a really hard day at work and you need to vent and you do it just to release it, I feel like that's how I get about wine. If I don't talk about wine enough during a week, if I've had, a week where I've just been answering emails and coordinating things, there's just a time where you need to sit in front of a camera or in a group full of people or with friends and talk about wine. And it kind of resets your mind and it makes me feel more calm. Look at me talking about wine again. Anyway, jump in the comments. Tell me where you're calling from. Tell me if you're drinking the 2017 Touriga Nacional, which is a Portuguese grape. Touriga Nacional is the grape in this wine. This is coming from Robert Clay Vineyard, which is a really cool biodynamic vineyard in the Texas Hill Country, who has made beautiful wine with us for a while now. They have a really cool website, by the way. Robert Clay Vineyard has some really cool, unique techniques that they use. So they're worth getting on their website. I mean, they did a really good job with it. I enjoy it. All right, let's see who's in the comments. Hello, Will and Kirsten in Austin. I was just in Austin today. I got to tell you what I was doing today. Hi, Tracy. How are you? Hi, Rachel and Chris. Wonderful to see y'all again. Rachel and Chris and Tracy were all watching last year when we did Summer Sippin', which is another educational series that you can actually watch recorded videos of on our Facebook and YouTube pages if you have any interest. Catherine in San Antonio, lovely to see you again. Julie in Houston, awesome. Yay, I'm glad you have the wine for tonight. And Casey, hi Casey, how are you? Oh, you're gonna make me blush. I work with Casey, she's wonderful. And Angela in Michigan. What are you doing in Michigan? Are you from Texas? Are you from Michigan? Do you reside in Michigan? Are you getting Texas wine sent to Michigan? Because that would be incredible. Yeah, shout out if you think you're the furthest person from Texas watching this series. I'm really curious. I think, Angela, you may win. But let's see, who knows? Okay, so while we're opening this delicious wine, I'm not going to make y'all wait to drink this wine. Please jump in, have a glass, and decant this wine if you would like to bring out some of the fruitiness of it, because Touriga Nacional is not immediately a very fruity grape, and it can be very, very intense on the nose and on the palate. So decanting will help bring everything into balance. So that is dealer's choice. I'm going to drink this straight up today, meaning that it's going to be very intense. And that, to me, is going to help it change more with food. And we'll talk more about that because today we are talking about food and wine pairing. And next week, we're talking about food and wine pairing. So we are going to do a 2-week series on food and wine together. Today, we're going to talk about assessing the wine and how to immediately react and think about food. We're going to go over some common misconceptions with food and wine pairing. And we're also going to go over the first things that you should be thinking about when you taste a wine and are thinking about pairing it with a snack or a dinner or whatever you're going to be eating. Today I was in Austin. I am I have been running around a lot this week. Today I was in Austin at a wonderful event called Spain Fusion, which is a food and wine event. It's really cool that I get to talk about food and wine pairing today because this event was all about that, food and wine from Spain. So we tasted some Spanish wine. I missed the sparkling wine section to come here and talk to you guys because I love you all that much more than sparkling Spanish wine, which is a lot. And I got to taste jamon iberico and serrano, and I got to taste some Spanish cheeses, a variety of them. I got to taste sherry vinegar and some extra virgin olive oil made with Spanish olives. And there are a variety of Spanish olives that I didn't know exist and make very, very different types of olive oils. So we talked all about this huge country for food and wine pairing. I mean, food and wine all the wine is so food centric in Spain. And what really blew me away today at this event was how excited the Spaniards were to talk about their products. And not that every wine growing and food region isn't excited to talk about their product, but there's just a generosity and humility that comes along with talking about the Spanish influence that goes into wine and food that was really, really cool to sit and listen to some of these chefs and masters of wine speak today. So thank you all to the team members of mine that joined us for this industry event. That is going to kick off a very interesting and highly exciting conversation today because I'm going to pull a lot of what I learned from Spanish Fusion into the discussion today. Tell me if you've ever been to Spain and had some of the wines there. We're not drinking Spanish wine today, even though it is International Tempranillo Day. We are drinking a Portuguese grape, so borderline. This is a grape that we're starting to see pop up in Spain, but in France too. Touriga Nacional is being planted in Bordeaux, actually. So anyway, I digress. Spain Fusion was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to hear about any of y'all's trips to Spain. I have never personally been to Spain, but I am itching to go. It's just deciding whether I want to go to the south where sherry is made or the northern regions where, Galicia is. And you have the coast and conservas and beautiful Spanish sparkling wine across all the way to Albarino and some red wines like Mencia in the middle. And then, there's so many more places to go. It's going to be really hard to decide unless I go for a couple months. All right, a couple more people have hopped on. Awesome. Shella, Sandra, and Mel. Where is Arascosita? Where is that? Awesome. Lorenza and Merkel. Wonderful, wonderful. Sherry, welcome. I work with Sherry as well. Lane, lovely to see you again. I hope you watched back last week because I think you missed. Welcome back. And she is in Fredericksburg begging for a decanter. Use a vase, use anything. You don't really need a decanter. And in all honesty, this is a decanter in itself. Fun trick. If you have 2 glasses, or if you are sharing wine with another person tonight, simply pour from one vessel to another twice. Bam, decanted. When you're in a pinch, it's all possible. That being said, having a beautiful decanter is a whole nother level of just beauty and ceremony around the wine. So yes, get yourself a lovely decanter. We have a selection at William Chris if you would like. Donna and Doug, good to see y'all on here. Awesome. Okay. And a lot of y'all are drinking the Touriga Nacional. Okay. So let's talk about this wine before anything. Okay. First, looking at the color. This is such a deep, inky red. It is beautifully deep in color. And if you pour this next to any other red wine, you are going to be so struck by how much deeper the pigment is in here and how bright and poppy it is. Because as wine ages in bottle, it tends to get lighter in color because the pigment is falling to the bottom as sediment. This is still super, super vibrant in color. Like, I feel like I could put this on my lips and it would be like lipstick. So I expect us all to have really inky teeth by the end of this tasting. All right, let's smell this wine. Powerful. And it's highly spiced, isn't it? It's earthy, it's spiced, it's tobacco, it's leather, it's licorice. There's some fruit in there, but it's definitely not the first thing that hits my nose. And that is what Touriga Nacional is all about. This is not a super fruity grape. It is all of that other lovely stuff that you get with wine. But it is powerful. I mean, it's just reaching out and hitting you in the nose, kind of smacking you in the face. Decanting will mellow that out just a little bit, but I love that punch you in the face, Touriga Nacional. And I bet when you taste this wine, you're going to have a similar reaction. Well, it took a moment, and then all of a sudden it just rushed in. Okay, so there's a couple things happening with this wine. First of all, it is so powerful, it's begging for something to balance it out. Decanting will help balance the wine out. It'll help mellow it out. The other thing that's happening is that the fruit is not what's shouting out on the palate either. This is not a super fruity wine. I'm getting so much coffee, like dark coffee, like really rich coffee. There's tobacco, there's leather, there's tons of complexity in this, but this is a powerhouse wine that is almost hard to drink by itself. So enter food pairing. Food pairing is what we can do to bring this wine into balance. And today we're going to talk about what components in food would bring this wine completely into balance and help round it out. So when I say that this is a food pairing wine, I don't mean there's a certain flavor that we're trying to pair to. I don't mean that it seems too tart or that there's something that seems out of balance here. What I'm looking for when I'm looking for a wine that is great for food pairing is what the finish is telling me. So after you have sipped the wine and you've swallowed it, and the wine is lasting on your palate for a long time, if the finish is very, very pleasant and fruity, that's a great sign that your wine doesn't need any food to balance it out. If the wine is tart on the finish, if it has a sourness on the finish, if it is really herbal on the finish, if it's bitter on the finish, if you get a rush of alcohol on the finish, all of these are wonderful signs that your wine wants to be paired with food. The wine is telling you something. And this wine I picked specifically for today because this wine always tells me, please eat something with me. And that's a great sign. Tabitha, I saw your comments. We are drinking the 2017 Touriga Nacional from Robert Clay Vineyard. And we're just appreciating it right now. So this wine, really all Touriga Nacional, has a finish that's either tart or bitter or herbaceous, and it begs for food. And there are a couple of things that I regularly pair with Touriga Nacional so that the wine, once I've eaten the food, suddenly mellows out and the finish is no longer bitter, no longer acidic, or no longer herbaceous, and you get lush fruit or whatever else you're looking for in wine. So in addition to today's food pairing exercise, we are going to talk next week about food pairing with the Grenache. So what I've done here is I've selected a very, very bold wine, the Touriga Nacional, to talk about today, and a lighter, fresher wine to talk about next week, because we're going to pair food very differently when we have a highly fruity wine or a lighter bodied wine versus a very non-fruity wine. And this is a big difference that I encourage you to think about. When you pick up wine and you taste it, is it highly fruity? Is it a softer wine? Or is it an edgy, non-fruity wine? And that's going to be a big difference on what we pair. But before we dig too deep into that, let's talk about, because I get asked questions about food pairing a lot. First, I get asked, what pairs well with this? And there's such a wide realm that I can give you a couple of dish recommendations, but I'm going to arm you guys with the foundation of why I pick the things that I do. But let's start with the misconceptions that I often hear about wine. Common misconception number one, that is that food pairing is all about the flavor of the wine. So we tasted this wine, we smelled it, we said, oh, it's not very fruity. There's a little hint of cherry. There's lots of herbs. There's tobacco and licorice. The common misconception is that those things that I just said are going to be what influence the wine and food pairing. And while they do have a small bit to do with the food and wine pairing, what we're looking for to accurately pair food and wine together is the structure of the wine, not the flavors. So if you feel like you go into wine and you smell and can't really get in touch and identify specific flavors in the wine, that is okay, because that is not what food and wine pairing is about. We're going to talk a lot about structure today. And after we talk about the misconceptions, we're going to go through the structural components of this wine and how to assess those accurately so you can then pair food to it. Common misconception number two, there is a right and wrong way to pair wine. And that is simply not true. I think maybe all of us have heard the standard white wine with fish and red wine with meat or steak. And that is far from the truth. There is a reason why those things are said, because generally fish is light in body or light in weight as far as a dish goes. And white wines tend to be lighter than red wines. That being said, there's such a wide range of first white wines that can be very, very full bodied and overpower a piece of white fish maybe. And then there are really powerful seafood dishes that beg for a red wine. And if we had a really powerful something like red fish with this Touriga Nacional, it could be really, really lovely. What we're going to talk about is the other components that go into locking into a pairing. So don't get stuck in the right and wrong for food and wine pairing. There is a ton of experimentation, and often what you need for a food pairing is for one ingredient to be added or taken away. We're going to talk more about that. All right. Misconception number three, that food and wine pairing is a pass or fail experiment. There is such a wide spectrum here. You can have the best pairing that you have ever had. For me, that was ruby port and dark chocolate. That lightning food pairing. That shocked me. It was one of the first food pairings that I had ever done with wine, where I understood why people talk about this so much. And then there have been some food and wine pairings where the wine was a total miss. It was super dull after I had paired it with the food, or the food tasted wrong afterwards, or it highlighted the wrong note. And then there's the spectrum in between. You can have a neutral food and wine pairing where the wine and the food don't change each other, or maybe the wine changes a little bit and the wine gets a little bit more tart. But if the wine gets a little bit more tart, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different type of food and wine pairing than maybe you were going for. So part of this is take out the pass or fail. There's no right or wrong here. There is, what do you want the wine to taste like? After tasting this Touriga Nacional, what do you want more from this wine? What do you want to go away? For me, what I'm going to be looking for this wine is I'm going to look for the wine to soften a little bit. I want it to be a little bit more playful, less serious, less powerful, because it has so much power in it. I want to tame that down a little bit. I want the finish to be less bitter. When the finish is less bitter, I think I'll find out more about this wine, and we can make it really playful by playing with just a couple of components with the food. I hope that made sense. There are many other misconceptions with wine. If you've heard any that you're not sure are true, pop them in the comments and I will come back and see if I can help y'all work through any of those. Let me check out the comments to see if there were any other comments on drinking Spanish wine. Awesome. No questions so far. Okay, so let's dive into talking about the components of wine that change with food and the components of food that can change a wine. Okay. In a wine, the components that will change have nothing to do with flavor compounds. What will change is the balance and the structure of the wine. So the wine will either seem less fruity or more fruity. The wine will either seem less or more sweet. It will seem less or more dry, less or more acidic, and less or more alcoholic. Those are the 5 major components that will change when we suddenly have food in front of us. Sometimes the wine won't change at all and all of these will remain neutral, but that's a pretty rare occasion. It does happen. But most often when we have so many components that go together in foods, something's going to change in the wine. Keep in mind that the wine doesn't become more fruity. The wine doesn't become more acidic or less acidic. What's changing is our perception of the wine. So to notice how each of these change, we need to first fully assess the wine. So let's do that now. We've already said this isn't a super fruity wine. It doesn't smell very alcoholic. And this is a medium alcohol wine. It's right at 12.4. We've talked about the alcohol of the wine, giving you a good idea of what the body of the wine is like. So if you have a wine that's between 11% and 14% alcohol, you have a medium percentage of alcohol. And that typically means you have a medium bodied wine. The only things that will increase or decrease the body of the wine are the presence of sugar. The presence of high acidity will make the wine seem lighter in body, and the presence of tannin will make the wine seem fuller in body. So let's assess those now. This wine has tannin, but it's not an egregious amount of tannins. It is medium tannin. The medium tannin and medium alcohol is giving me a medium bodied wine here. The acidity of the wine, we talked about this in a previous class. You can tell how acidic the wine is, not by how tart it tastes, because that's about how the wine is in balance. We're talking about how much your tongue is watering. So let's do the acidity test that I walked y'all through a couple weeks ago. Stick your tongue out. Let your under tongue fill with water. It's filling up a lot. Swallow and do it again. My mouth is still watering. It's not watering a ton, but it's definitely higher than medium acidity and lower than high acidity. So it's got a good amount of acidity in it, which is great for pairing to certain components in food. So let's talk about what these components are. If we have medium tannin, a little bit higher than medium acidity, we'll call it medium plus acidity, and medium alcohol. Those are the components that we're looking at, as well as the wine is completely dry. There is no sugar in this wine. William Chris doesn't make any sweet wines. The components in food that will change are the following: salt, sour, fat, bitter, umami, spice, and sweet. So all of these components are what we look at to change these different components, the structural components of wine. And here's how those will interact. And I've grouped these together in groups of 3, and I've left alcohol and spice off to the side. So first we'll talk about things that increase the fruitiness and sweetness perception of the wine. And those 3 things are salt, fat, and sour. So I'll give you an example. If you have a wine like such that is not very fruity and that is very dry, and you want it to seem softer, if you want to increase the fruitiness of the wine, and if you want to increase the sweetness perception of the wine, not to have a sweet wine, but to take away some of the dryness, because this is quite a bitter wine, you can add salt to your food. You can add sour component to your food, and you can eat something fatty, which is why cheese is a wonderful pairing. With wine, which typically has dryness and can always use a little bit more fruitiness, cheese has both fat and acidity in it because it's made from milk. These components soften the wine and can make it seem softer and more pleasant. If you brought a salty snack, this is when I'd like you to try the salty snack and then taste the wine again. Theoretically, if I pair this wine with a little bit of salt, which I have right here, and if I had a lemon and I sucked on the lemon, both of those would pop up the fruitiness and soften the wine. And that's what I would love to happen for this wine. So taste the wine, taste the salt. I'm going to tell y'all what my experience is with this, but I'd love for y'all to tell me in the comments as well. Oh, that's just lovely. So I've just added salt to this. The salt has popped up the fruitiness, and no longer is there a bitter finish on the back of my tongue. Suddenly the finish is super pleasant. I get softness, I get fruitiness. The wine seems a little bit sweeter, but not much. It doesn't taste like it's a sweet wine now. It just doesn't taste as dry as it was before. If y'all have a salty snack, tell me if that was the same experience for you. Oh, and now I'm tasting the tobacco and like kind of bitter herb. It's almost like black tea. I'm tasting it again, which would tell me that I either need to salt even more, I need more salt, or I need to add a sour component. And there are several ways to do that. You can add a cream sauce, which has acidity in it. You can add some chocolate shavings. Chocolate has acidity. You can add a fruit component, or you can squeeze a bit of lemon over what you're eating. So it really doesn't matter what the base is, whether you have chicken or pork or steak or fish. Grab a piece of lemon or a cream sauce and salt your dish. You have a food pairing there. All right, now let's talk about these other components. Dryness and acidity, bitter umami, and sweet. These three will all make your wine seem harsher. So if you eat something bitter, if you eat something that has umami in it, which is like a piece of meat or mushrooms, miso has umami in it, soy. All of these have umami. Many, many other things have umami as well. And then anything sweet. So when we're pairing wine and chocolate together, the common reason why people say that wine and chocolate doesn't go together is because the chocolate has sugar and therefore it makes the wine taste more bitter. And that can be true if you have a very sweet, overly sweet chocolate. So bitter umami and sweet will make your wine seem less fruity, less sweet, more dry, and more acidic. So imagine this Touriga Nacional, if you were eating something like a kale salad that had mushrooms on it and a really sweet dressing. You have a recipe that's going to cause this wine to taste more bitter, more tart than it is now, and even drier. Keep in mind that if that sounds delicious to you, then this is a wonderful food pairing. For me, that's not what I want out of this wine. I want to soften this wine. Next week, when we talk about this Grenache, we are talking about how to add umami and sweetness and bitterness in order to make this wine less soft so it can get some edge. But always first know that it is personal preference. You have to first answer the question of what you want to happen with this wine. One thing that I was missing with this wine when I tasted it was acidity. The wine has medium plus acidity, but I really had to search for it and pay attention to how much my tongue was watering. I would like for the wine to taste a little bit more tart than it is now. I want it to taste fruitier. I want it to taste less bitter. And I want a little bit of a tart edge with this wine because that's how I feel right now. I like tart wines. I want this wine to stay edgy and not get too soft, but soften up just a little bit, which means we get to play with the recipe. This means that I can start with a kale salad. It's going to be bitter. It's going to make this wine seem a little bit more bitter, a little bit more acidic. But then I'm going to top it with a cream sauce that has some lemon in it. So I'm adding acidity and I'm adding fat. And then maybe I'll get a little bit crazy and I'll put some toasted nuts that are salted in there. Then I have three components that are going to make this wine taste less bitter, more fruity, and less dry. And then I have one component that's hopefully going to pop out the acidity of this wine. From here, we can start with a base and add components that will all do different things to the wine. And it's up to you to decide what components to take away or to add. And often it's just as simple as squeezing a lemon over the dish or adding a little bit of salt. Food and wine pairing is so much easier than we all think it is. It's just that there's no great rule book for it if you don't understand the basics. Please let me know if you have comments here, if you have any questions, or if I've said something confusing. I will reiterate everything in a more simple way if I can. All right, the last components we're going to talk about are alcohol and spice. And by spice, I mean chili spice, heat. There is a misconception that you don't pair high alcohol foods with a really spicy dish, because alcohol and spiciness is like gasoline on a fire. If you pair a high alcohol wine with a spicy dish, the spiciness will seem even higher, like way higher. The misconception here is that that is unpleasant, but it really depends how spicy you like your food. So this is where you have even more playroom, and why you have to pay attention to what your preference is at all times, instead of just listening to someone say, this is what you should pair with this wine. It really depends what you want from the wine. So in the example of alcohol and spiciness, imagine you have a wonderful pad thai in front of you, and you have ordered it on level 3 Thai spiciness, which I can't handle. I like spiciness because it means more flavor, but my choice would be to pair a low alcohol wine with that to help tame down the spiciness and have something refreshing. Another person may say that number 3 Thai spiciness has never been hot enough for me. I want to take 5 Thai spiciness, and then I'm going to pair a really high alcohol wine so that the spiciness is increased. If you can handle it, that's going to be an awesome pairing. And then there are some people who are in the middle. And with this Touriga Nacional, which is 12.3% alcohol, this is great for a spicy dish to make the spiciness seem a little bit higher, but not too much higher. There are 2 last factors that I want to talk about today. And next week, we're going to talk about how to lock in your pairings even deeper, because there are a couple of factors that we're not going to talk about today that are the extra like cherry on top tips that you really have to get deep into the industry to know. And I want to share those with you next week. But to finish out our major ideas for food and wine pairing, pair weight with weight. So the first thing that you should do when you go to pair wine on Thanksgiving Day or for your next wonderful meal celebration is go to the wine and find out what the body of the wine is like. Is this a light, medium, or full-bodied wine? We already mentioned this is a medium-bodied wine. So we are going to go for a medium-bodied dish. And the reason we don't want a light-bodied dish is because then the dish is at risk of disappearing underneath the wine and not standing up to it. If we pick a full-bodied dish, then we risk the wine getting smashed by the full body of the dish. So we're going to go medium-bodied here. And let me give you an example of a light, medium, and full-bodied dish. Full-bodied, grilled ribeye. Ribeye is already like big, meaty. You know that you have to be really hungry when you go to eat a ribeye if you're going to have a chance of eating even halfway through it. And then grilling it on top of that increases the body of the dish. That is tons of body. Light bodied, on the other hand, is that salad that we talked about. Kale is a bit of a powerful herb, but imagine like a wedge salad. That is very light in body. It has a little bit of bacon crumble, maybe a mild blue cheese, a little bit of onion, and a really, really lightly flavored lettuce. Another example would be a whitefish. That's a light-bodied dish. Some chicken dishes are even really light in body. Medium-bodied. A medium-bodied dish, I would start with chicken. I would start with pork. It may be something like shrimp. Lobster can be medium-bodied, but typically what makes a dish medium-bodied is a sauce that increases the body of whatever protein. So chicken with mushroom sauce, that sounds like a nice medium-bodied meal. I could eat it if I wasn't too hungry, and if I was really hungry, I would still probably be a little hungry at the end of eating that dish. That tells me that that's a medium-bodied dish. And that is exactly what I would pair this Touriga Nacional to, something at that right medium body. From there, the second major consideration, besides weight with weight, the weight of the dish with the weight of the wine, is your preference. What we've talked about a lot today. If you hate mushrooms, chicken and mushrooms is not going to be the perfect pairing with this wine. If you hate red wine, no dish is going to make this more enjoyable for you. We can soften the wine all we want, but ultimately, if you want to be drinking white wine with a steak, that is what you should do. Whether the steak crushes the wine or whether you're having a really full-bodied white wine with a really light-bodied dish, it's not going to be what you want to be eating or drinking. So you must consider your preference. And when you are given a food pairing recommendation, you always need to take it with a grain of salt, because the salt will make the wine fruitier, but also because recommendations don't often take into consideration what you most enjoy. And going back to this wine, someone may really enjoy how this wine isn't very tart, or how it is really, really earthy and deep, and they may really like that bitter edge. I am personally very sensitive to bitterness, so that's not what I first go for. My first reaction to this wine is take away that bitter edge. I don't like that. I like a light roast coffee. So always, always consider what you like. This also makes it difficult when you have a partner that is the complete opposite of you. But now that you have these food pairing foundations, if you were going to pair this dish to a pork loin that is herb crusted, which I think would be a wonderful pairing. One of you wants the dish to taste, one of you wants the wine to taste bitter. They like that bitterness. All you would have to do is eat the pork and the herb crust as it is. Say you're drinking this with someone who doesn't like this bitterness. They're saying they're going to go get another wine that's lighter and softer. All you would have to do is say, no, honey, you shouldn't do that. You just need to put a little cream sauce on this or a little bit of salt. And all of a sudden, this is going to be the soft, lush wine that they want. And that is another power of food and wine pairing. You can make this wine change and range from your light-bodied, really fruity wine drinkers to your really bold, bitter, like edgy wine drinkers. Wine can become anything you want with the right food pairing. And the right food pairing is just one small component that separates it from right and wrong. All right, I had a couple of comments come in, and I have the feeling that someone asked a really good question. Let's see. Shella says that they tasted the salt and drank the wine, and it made a huge difference. Shella, tell me what the difference was. Did you find it fruitier? Did that bitterness go away? Did anything else happen? Always keeping in mind that everyone's having a different experience with the wine than I am, and each other. We all come to wine at a different place, so y'all may be tasting this totally different than me. Lane is trying 2 cheeses with this, a port wine cheese, which made the acid like majorly increase, and that's probably because maybe the wine is a little bit sweet. I mean, maybe the cheese is a little bit sweet. Port is a sweet wine, and so infusing that into cheese means that you have a sugar component in the cheese that is probably making the wine taste higher in acidity and a little bit drier. Awesome. And it gives it a long finish. And then the Merlot cheese made it slightly acidic, but also smoothed it out. And Merlot is a dry wine, so that's likely why it didn't increase the acidity as much. Awesome. Rachel had Indian food last night and is trying a sweeter tikka masala and a goat karma. Oh, what a cool pairing with Touriga Nacional. Y'all must be very familiar with Touriga Nacional because that is exactly where I would go with this. Touriga Nacional I like to pair with really exotically spiced cuisines just because it matches the wine so well. Like anything Mediterranean, anything Indian food, anything that has a high spice component, and not heat spice, but cardamom and cinnamon and nutmeg and clove, I feel like just it matches with the personality of this wine, doesn't it? Donna is asking, would Enchante or Hunter pair best with turkey? What a good question. If you're talking about the older vintages of Enchante and Hunter, where Hunter was Merlot heavy and Enchante was Cabernet Sauvignon heavy, why not do both? There's no reason not to do both. The major difference between that is Hunter, when it was Merlot heavy, is very, very soft in texture. And texture is something that we haven't talked about today that we're going to talk about with the Grenache next week. The texture of that wine is really soft and plush, and turkey is a meat that it tends to fall apart or be very juicy. So I think Hunter and turkey would go very, very well together. And then Enchante tends to have a bit more structure, more acidity, more tannin. Enchante, I think, begs for a fattier piece of meat, something like a steak or something that has a cream sauce. That being said, if you're adding gravy, Enchante must be maybe your best bet. Both is what I'll recommend. We're going to talk next week a lot about why pair one wine with food when you can pair 3 wines or 5 wines. You really need to have an array because there's no one perfect bottle for the dish you're going to serve. There's a perfect trio out there that'll allow you to taste a wine and then taste how it changes with the food, and then go to the next wine and taste how it changes with the food, and then go to the next wine, taste it, and taste how it changes with the food. And I guarantee you all 3 of them are going to be exciting changes if you've considered the components that we talked about today. And then it's like you're tasting 6 different wines instead of 3 because you taste them before and after they've been paired with food. I digress. Grenache and turkey. Lane, I think you're spot on. When we taste the Grenache next week, Donna, I think you'll see that Grenache is going to be the winner there. And since turkey is our Thanksgiving Day feast, all the rest of what's on the table, like mulled cranberries and tons of mushrooms and black pepper. Thanksgiving is a very highly spiced meal, and Grenache is a spiced grape. So I think Grenache will be the winner there. Wine is often paired with a charcuterie board. Why does that usually work? Think about the components in cheese. Cheese is made of milk. The milk has been not processed, but aged to the point that it firms into some sort of lovely texture. Part of it is the texture of the cheese. Part of it is the acidity that's in milk. Acidity makes the wine seem less dry, less acidic, more fruity, which is typically very pleasant. And then often there's a salty component to cheese, or we have something on the charcuterie board that adds a salt component. Think about almonds that have been salted or roasted. Think about any of the cured meats on a charcuterie board. That salty aspect typically makes the wine seem even more soft and lush. And then cheese is fatty. Milk is fat and acid. Both of those are in our group of components in food that make the wine seem softer. And that's my short answer for why those typically go well together. The only time that may change is when you have something like a blue cheese, which is still fatty, still acidic, but has an edge to it. It can have a bitterness, it can have a funkiness. And so that changes your cheese pairing just a little bit. But generally, any cheese and any meat will make a wine seem softer. It's just what kind of cheese and wine you like best. From there, it's personal preference. Also, when we're talking about charcuterie boards, keep in mind that jam and honey are sweet components that will make your wine seem more bitter and dry, which can be a good thing if your wine is starting to taste too soft. Then you just dab on a little bit of honey to bring back a little bit of edginess to the wine. But jam and honey sparingly. It really only takes a small amount, but the charcuterie board is beautiful because you can pair a couple things together to create the balance in the food that you want to change the wine just the right amount for yourself. Oh, I have a couple good questions. I got to go in order. John tried Parmesan with this wine. Parmesan is a very powerful cheese, and this wine is a very powerful wine. So I think you nailed the weight with weight component. You found a really concentrated cheese to pair with a really concentrated wine. And when we talk about the Grenache next week, you're going to realize that it's a lot lighter and lusher. So your cheese can be a semi-soft cheese, or maybe it can be a soft goat cheese or something like that. And that'll likely be a lovely pairing. Shell, it became fruitier. Yeah, the wine is really bitter at first. It's not very fruity, but doesn't salt just change everything? I mean, I would drink this like a margarita with a salt rim almost, because it just pops the fruit out of it. Okay, so the question I like, if you're not a blue cheese fan, I am a blue cheese fan. So Tracy, I feel you. I push blue cheese on a lot of people. I've pushed it on you before. Can a wine change whether you like blue cheese or not? And the answer is absolutely. And I have a great example that we'll finish off for today. Blue cheese, I love to pair with really soft red wines like Merlot. Merlot has a lovely velvety texture and it's really soft. But when you pair Merlot and blue cheese together, it enhances the blue cheese flavor, which is great for a blue cheese lover. But what do you do if you don't like blue cheese, or if you want your really stinky cheese, like a triple cream cheese that just kind of like lovely cheese funky? If you want to tame that down, that is where light, bright, really fruity wines come in handy. So pick something like a Viognier, which is very floral and very fruity, or something like an Albarino, a crisp white wine that's made by Lost Straw Cellars or William Chris, because they're also rounding out a really lovely textured body with all of their wines. Any of those will make the blue cheese seem less blue cheesy. But the real thing that will make you love blue cheese, Tracy, is a sweet wine. And this is for those people who enjoy a sweet wine. A sweet wine will make the blue cheese seem not earthy. It'll bring out all the fruit in that cheese. This is when the wine changes less than the cheese changes, because blue is such a powerful flavor. The wine can really affect whether it increases in that earthiness or decreases. Sweet wine has enough sugar in it to make the blue cheese tame itself, which is why blue cheese is a classic pairing with something like Sauternes, which is a very famous sweet white wine made in Bordeaux, France. And something like Moscato d'Asti, which is a semi-sparkling sweet wine from Italy. Both of those are classic blue cheese pairing partners with really, really stinky blue cheeses, because they tame down that blue cheese. And it's the best dessert that I could hope for, is a piece of blue cheese with sweet wine. Ultimately, Tracy, don't force yourself to love blue cheese. There's so much other cheese out there. If you don't like cheese, there's so much other food out there. You'll find something else that you love. But my guess is adding a salty component to your blue cheese with a wine that has at least a little bit of sugar will make you see the value that we all do in blue cheese. It's also a texture thing. Nothing can change the texture of blue cheese. So you really got to find a blue cheese that works with you. And keep in mind that, like all wine changes, not all Touriga Nacionals are made the same. Definitely not all blue cheeses are made the same. So some of them are probably less your favorite than others. All right. I digress about blue cheese. I could talk about that for a long time. Awesome. Lane has a tip for you on how to love blue cheese. Put it over steak, and isn't that the truth? Lane, okay, so you got confused with bitterness versus tartness. Can you address that? Oh, yeah, I would love to. Okay, so I'll use this wine as an example. So when I taste this wine, it doesn't seem tart to me. Tartness is not the first thing I notice. It seems soft. If you tasted, what was the wine a couple weeks ago? We talked about it having a really, really tart finish. It was the Tempranillo that we tried a couple weeks ago. Remember tasting that wine and how it just finished really, really tart, like there was a bit of lemon or citrus on the back of it. That tartness, some of y'all actually found unpleasant, and after decanting it, the tartness kind of went away. And we talked about that Tempranillo only having medium acidity. And it's because in that wine, with the balance of that wine, the acidity seemed more apparent than it was. In this wine, we have medium plus acidity because we detected how much our mouth watered. But it doesn't taste tart. All the other flavors and texture wrap around the acidity and make it not so apparent. Bitterness is something you get, it's like a drying. Okay, great example. Imagine sucking on a black tea, a bag of black tea. If you suck on that, you're going to extract bitter tannin. If you oversteep black tea and drink it, there's no citrus component in it, but it will taste bitter. This is where you have bitterness instead of acidity. They're very, very different. And there's great experiments centered around tea. If you steep black tea for a couple of minutes and then put an entire lemon in it, you're going to have a very tart black tea. But if you steep that tea for longer and put 3 lemons in it, it's not going to seem as tart and it's going to seem more bitter. So these components seem really similar, but ultimately they're just slightly different than each other. I hope that helped. Tart does hit the jawbone, so you feel it back here. It's like a singe. But I would say try oversteeping some tea and having a lemon nearby. Don't mix them together. Drink the tea, feel what that bitterness feels like, and then take a sip of water and then just go suck on the lemon. And there you'll have the clear difference between acidity and bitterness. Both are components that kind of change in wine in line with each other, but that exercise should help you nail down exactly what the difference is. And it's an exercise that I've done before. Awesome. Okay. Lane, I hope that helped. If you want to talk more about it, we will continue on with our food pairing discussion next week. But before we do, I know that y'all are all thinking about food and wine pairing now because in a couple of weeks it becomes very important. So I wanted to let y'all know that we have a couple of food pairing packs on our website. One of them is mixed. It's a multi-brand. So we have the Grower Project, Skeleton Key, Lost Straw Cellars, and William Chris wine in there. And I wrote a blog to go along with it that pairs certain dishes and explains why the dish works well with each wine. And then you can purchase it at a highly discounted price and impress everyone in the family. And then we released a turkey pairing pack yesterday that has a collection of red blends. It's a 6-pack and it comes with a recipe for dressing. It's a gluten-free dressing that's made from gluten-free cornbread. I just tasted it last night and it's incredible. So all of that is rolled up in a pack together and you can get it at williamchriswines.com. Just to help y'all prepare for the holidays, I will have both of those on my holiday table. As well as this Grenache, which we are going to drink next week. So don't miss next week. We're going to talk about how to pair a lighter, lusher wine with some of the different components that we didn't talk about today. And we're going to talk about how to lock in your pairings just a little bit deeper, a little bit more. And these are like my big secret tips that I always use to pair food and wine exceptionally well together. But for now, until next time, if you have any further comments, post them in and I will answer them for you guys next week. But for now, I will let y'all go and continue enjoying this Touriga Nacional with some very salty crackers. All right. Thanks so much, guys. I will see you next week. Bye.